Hello everyone, Ian Wishart here, and it is my distinct pleasure to welcome you to Season 4 of the Take a Pew podcast. Now, despite my best endeavours, I am still joined by the great mystery that goes by the name of Simon Clark.
Yes, hello dear listener. New season, mate? When did we all start using the word season? Always used to be called a series.
Yeah, that's true, but it's just a thing these days. And anyway, season is a very Christian word. Christians are always talking about being in a season of reflection, a season of revival and so on.
Weird. Although we are called to be the salt of the earth, I suppose.
Yes, and I suppose you're going to pepper the conversation with eternal truths. Anyway, talking of, if not actually purveying comedy, we have a proper comedy maestro to meet today, don't we?
Indeed we do. None other than Paul Kerensa. A bit different from most of our other guests, he's only an occasional preacher in the Church of England.
Oi, nothing wrong with us occasional preachers, mate.
Oh yeah, sorry mate. Anyway, apart from that, Paul is a stand-up comedian, a co-writer on some much-loved radio and television programmes including Miranda, Not Going Out and Top Gear, a radio presenter, a podcaster, an author, an historian. The list goes on. In fact, he's a veritable polymath.
Yes, and I understand that he's also an expert on Old Testament books named after women. So he's not only a polymath, he's a polyester.
Oh, that's terrible, mate.
What, like the rest of our material's comedy gold?
Yeah, fair point. Anyway, as a marine biologist, I was particularly interested to see that one of Paul's books is called Shark.
No, I think it's actually called Hark. And it's actually an excellent book about the history of Christmas, with, as far as I recall, absolutely no mention of fish.
Elasmobranchs.
You what?
Sharks are elasmobranchs.
Well, easy for you to say, Jacques Cousteau. Anyway, I think we should quit while we're behind and get on with the show.
I think you're right, mate.
Right then, this is the Take a Pew podcast with Paul Kerensa.
Paul Kerensa.
Take a Pew. And you find us today here at Take a Pew Towers, another home gig. Hurrah! And we've been joined by our splendid guest, who hasn't had to travel too far, only from nearby Guildford. Yes, it's Paul Kerensa. Paul, thank you for coming to see us, and please, take a pew.
Well, thank you. It's a marvellous pew to be taken.
Hello, Paul. It's great to meet you. Perhaps you could just introduce yourself to our lovely listeners.
Indeed. I presume they're lovely. I've not met all of them.
Most of
them. My name is Paul Kerensa. I'm a comedian, writer. I mean, all the stuff you said at the top, really. You know, I'm a person. I'm a husband. I'm a father. I have 2 children. I have 1 wife, which I think is probably the correct way of having those numbers. And I don't know how old. I'm mid-40s. I've lost count. I think I'm 44-ish, something like that.
Yeah, that's close enough.
I'm loving life.
Wonderful.
Excellent,
Well, I'm
excellent.
very pleased to hear it. Now, this may be a new season of Take a Pew, but we've stuck with our winning formula. So we'll be chatting about how life has brought you to where you are today, cantering through your favourite things, enjoying your fabulous Take a Pew dinner party, and bringing your illumination in Is It True and your spiritual pearl of wisdom.
Yes, and I'm especially pleased to confirm the return of Simon's random question.
Yes, well, as I said, we've stuck to our formula. Anyway, it's going to be great. Let's begin at the beginning. Where did life start for you, Paul? I understand it was somewhere not entirely full of sheep.
It wasn't entirely full of sheep.
No.
Half full of sheep is all it was. Well, Cornwall, which has got sheep in it, I suppose. I mean, we're pretenders to Wales. We look up there in awe at their language and their assembly and the like. And I was born in Cornwall in the late 70s, and it wasn't. I mean, I'm sure at some point we'll touch on health or medical stuff at some point, because I talk about it a lot in my comedy anyway. But I was whisked to Great Ormond Street Hospital straight away. So I was born essentially with some organs on the outside, which should have been, I mean, they're called internal organs, aren't they? The clue's in the name.
clue's absolutely.
So, and Cornwall couldn't quite cope with this, so they whisked me in an ambulance from Cornwall to London.
It's just a normal ambulance. It wasn't a helicopter.
I don't think they had
You don't
helicopters
remember?
back then. I don't
This
think
is back in the 70s.
This is exactly. I think we didn't even have a motorway, so I think it was. I like to think I passed Stonehenge, but not the last time in my life I passed notable stones. It was. Let's not go there. But no, so I was back and forth between Cornwall and London from the early days, which is probably why my accent is less Cornwall and more London. But there you go. Still here to tell the tale.
Quite a hurdle to overcome, though. It must have made quite a difference to your very early years.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't. Obviously, you know, when your memories kick in, about 4 or 5, is it, something like that? But I do have memories of being in hospital, but particularly up until the age of about 5, 6 or 7, I think I had 99 operations by the time I was 5, I was told. I thought they could have found one more thing to do.
Well, that's disappointing.
To make 100, wouldn't it be marvellous?
Yeah.
But I think I was in Great Ormond Street for sometimes a couple of months at a time, but mostly out of it. I wasn't one of these, I wasn't in there full time, but it did mean that I think I was a term late starting school, for example. I joined in January, and all the other kids had made friends and decided who they're going to marry and all that stuff. So I've been catching up ever since, really. You miss your first term, that's it. You become a comedian. There's no jobs for you if you miss that first crucial term.
It all stemmed from there, but it's all kind of stabilised, etc.
Stabilised. I go back once a year to make sure that everything's still where it should be and everything's fine. But so it's all right, really. But the weird thing is that the condition I had, quite a rare condition called extrophy, which is like extrophy, literally means out of body. It's an out of body experience. We normally think of the soul, not organs. But there aren't many. I think it's 1 in 100,000 births have had what I've had. It's not many. And they did a survey, a poll, or whatever you call it, a study of people with my condition, and a third of them go into healthcare, and a third of them go into entertainment, which is it's a high statistic, isn't it? So I think basically, if you're in kids' hospital, you either want to go and help people at the end of it or just cheer them up, So there are like 3 professional comedians, a clown, a couple of cartoonists. You just want to go out and forget normal jobs. You want to go and tickle people.
Isn't it funny? Anyway, so your family unit back then, what was it like?
I had a family unit. I had a mum, a dad, a brother, a younger brother. So I didn't have a brother then. He arrived a few years later. And and then we had dogs and cats and all that sort of thing. So, and my parents, we moved up from Cornwall then to Surrey. And then sort of embedded ourselves in village life, traditional village life. Our village was 1 church, 6 pubs, and most weeks you'd get around all of them. And my parents weren't particularly churchy people; they were village people. So one was a policeman, one was a builder. But it meant that anything to do with village life, we were doing. So I was in the choir and the youth group and the scouts, and all, the church was the hub really. And I ended up becoming a Christian, essentially, because my parents would send me off for free childcare, I think. And, it's sort of, I came back going, this is good stuff, this. And they're going, well, that wasn't the plan, but okay. So I'm the only Christian in the family that I know of. But
so it was quite an early thing, the whole church thing, the whole God things.
I guess I was doing regular church stuff from about 8, 9, 10 onwards. I was head chorister in the church choir and stuff. And, I remember distinctly, they said to me, as head chorister, you can sing the first verse of Once in Royal David City this Christmas. And I went, thank you very much. And then it got to like the week before Christmas. They went, you ready to start practicing? I went, yes, I'm ready. And then I was out of the choir within, a month because the voice just went before. So I never got to do all that stuff. But what was great about the church I was at, and I would commend this to other churches, is 1 or 2 people there, they just got me to write stuff like comedy sketches. Can you do an alternative Christmas comedy sketch? And I was like 11 or 12 or whatever. And weirdly at the church I'm at now, they've started to do similar with our kids. There's a guy there who goes, actually, to my kids, do you want to do this version of Joseph in his Dreamcoat with the puppets or whatever? And we're not going to give you a script. You go away. You've got a week to come up with a sketch based on. You've got to read the Bible passage. You, 12-year-old and 10-year-old, you're going to write this, you're going to rehearse it, you're going to perform it on Sunday. And just give them total trust, which is, I'm glad they've, the church leader's done that, because I wouldn't trust my kids with that. But then you think, well, what's the worst that can happen? And it's because of that sort of trust. That's the sort of trust I was given to do regular sketches and things. And it got me being a comedy writer. I don't think I'd have done it if it weren't for those 1 or 2 people at that church who said, we'll trust you with this.
It's amazing, isn't it, actually? What a way to start. And so there was lots of activity. What about the spiritual side? It's a bit of a grand word for a young person, but when did that fall upon you?
Well, I think I've got a specific moment, really. It was by a canal side in rural Birmingham, because I did these annual, was it Pathfinder and Cypher and these youth getaway things. There were like 40 teenagers on a few canal boats every year, and they again just trusted us not to fall in and drown and all that stuff. And it was just some young adult leaders and stuff, and loads of other people my age, and most people probably there were having fun and just doing activities, and the spiritual stuff was probably not necessarily everyone's primary thing they got out of it, but it was for me and certainly a few others. You know, there were maybe a good core of us, I would say, who I was in touch with afterwards, who were going, that was really transformative in our faith journeys. And I remember distinctly about 3 years in, I felt it was like an alpha course, but 1 week a year. You know, so 1 year it would be like, who are the disciples? What's that all about? Another year it's, you know, let's look at the book of Job, or I don't know, whatever it is. And about 3 years in there, I thought, okay, I think I know enough, I've heard enough, I understand enough, I get this, and that makes sense to me. And working out what prayer was and all that sort of thing, and thinking this is about, you know, that relationship with our Creator. That's kind of nice. That's kind of cool. And I sort of, you know, I didn't look at other religions, particularly like I was window shopping. But the more I thought about it, I thought Christianity, that's the one for me, because it makes sense. That when I prayed, I felt I was listened to. I felt God responding, and I felt like this is the one where you have this personal relationship with our divine Creator, not distanced, but He's been through this, and you know you feel like you've got this co-passenger in the giant motorway of life.
Wow. Sound like a very deep-thinking young man, which brings me to our first regular feature on the show, which is...
What were you like at school? Were you a little bit geeky? Or were you a little bit freaky? Or were you a little bit cheeky? What were you like at school?
Yes, Paul, what were you like at school?
A bit cheeky or geeky. Yeah. I had bladder problems. I was a bit leaky. But no, I was
very nice.
I was a bit geeky, but I think because of the medical stuff, I was, and to be honest, by that age, I was, you know, once you get past the first couple of years of school, you know, you're 8, 9, 10, 11, up to 13, 14, whatever. I was making the medical stuff work for me. You know, I was going, I've got this weird medical condition that the teachers find a bit icky. I can get off sport for years. And I did, you know, and not only that, my stage name is Kerensa, but my real surname is Young. Paul Young, the 80s pop star. Can't have that name. I had to pick a new one.
Yeah, of course.
But as a Young, anyone who's got, if you're listening and you've got your surnames, you know, a Y or a Z, you know full well that any roll call register, and you are waiting till the bitter end. And in sport, you know, they're doing page after page of the register. And I remember distinctly that mine was the one name at the top of page 3 or page 4 or page 8, whatever it was. And once that page went missing, they never bothered to replace it, you know. So I didn't do any sport for years. And now I'm mid-40s and making up for it, going, oh, I need to get some exercise in, you know. But that's when I started the comedy writing. You know, I was doing it a bit at church, but also then at school, drama clubs, being a bit of enjoying the nerdy stuff. So in answer to your finally jingled question, a little bit geeky.
Perfect.
Were you not cheeky as well? Did you answer back a bit to the teacher?
Well, I wasn't the class clown. You hear this a lot with comedians. I think the comedians, we're often not the class clown. We're often the ones a bit just to the remove from the group, lobbing in a quick, you know, a well thought through heckle or one line and ducking down. We don't want to be the one to be spotted who said it, and then you look around and that was us. I think so that was me. You know, I was Brilliant. Like the joke writer for other people. Like, you know, you could say this, they'd say it, they get into trouble, that sort of stuff.
And you went to quite a posh school in Guildford, I think, didn't you?
Yeah, poshish. Guildford Grammar, the Royal Grammar School, the RGS Guildford. Yeah, but it was there that I started doing things like, we had an annual charity day assembly where the school pupils got to write a sketch for the assembly. And again, I'm sort of charting my comedy writing journey as well here, I think. But me and another one or two pupils were tasked with writing this sketch lampooning the teachers. And I remember distinctly the teachers were looking at me like, we trust you, we don't trust them, they'll go crazy. But you're kind of funny, but you're kind of sensible enough as well that you're not going to go crazy. And sure enough, there were a couple of the other students who were sort of ready to out certain teachers in their school hall, and I was like, you know, interrupting and stuff. So I think very early on then I was kind of getting a sense of not only just where the limits are, you know, just kind of pushing a little bit, making it funny, but also, and what I still do as a stand-up today, making sure that everyone's included. And one of my big things is always trying to unify a room. You know, some comedians just go for their audience and are happy to divide and lose everyone else. I want to walk in a room and just make as many people happy as possible. I don't want to lose people. So that was coming in there.
Always the professional by the sound of it. And so there's no sport. you spent some time writing. Were there any other hobbies and interests that took up a lot of your time? As a youngster?
film. I suppose I used to like my films. I used to do a film.
That's handy.
A film podcast. I was one of in the very early days of podcasting, for about 2003-4. I started a film podcast called Movie Banter, which is probably still out there somewhere. We've not updated it for years, but as a result, I used to see not just I just see every film, every single film. I wasted my 20s essentially when I just started gigging. I just started doing my first stand-up gigs, and I get booked across the country. And in that time where I see comedians now who are spending their days writing that sitcom and furthering that career, working on their craft, developing their shows, I was watching 4 films a day and just coming back to review them on a podcast, which was great fun. But I feel my 20s were misspent in cinema.
Excellent. Well, look forward to coming back to films. My favourite things in a short while. But just before we move on to those 20s that you talked about, we have a second regular feature for you, and that is.
What's your fondest childhood memory? What's your fondest of all your childhood memories? What's your fondest?
Oh. Yes.
Your jingles are the best. You know that, don't you? I mean, of any podcast in the world, yours are the best. just know that. All right, know that. Yes. Fondest childhood memory. Flattery won't get me out of the question, will it?
No.
I don't, it's tricky to say, isn't it? Partly because
I bet there's one. I bet there's something came straight to mind.
I can't think of superlatives. Like the best of anything I find really tricky. So in terms of you said about the film stuff, I find it really tricky to do a top 5.
Right.
I could do you my top, my number 11 to 16 probably, but the top of anything is tricky. But I would think when I was in hospital, quite often when I came out of hospital, I'd be in for a few days or a few weeks, and near Great Ormond Street Hospital, sadly no longer there, beautiful magic shop called the Magic Spot. And my dad would take me in there, and the guy, it was one of these sort of really dusty old shops where
Mr. Benlight.
It was really like the guy literally had a fez. He literally had the door dings as he opened, and he'd come out, and everything's covered. It looked like an old sweet shop, except instead of sweets, it's tricks. And he'd show you a couple of tricks, and then I'd buy one. And I still love magic. I'm not very good at it, but I used to love going in there and picking out a really
nice.
Cool magic trick. That was always my little treat.
I think that counts as a very valid,
lovely
childhood memory. Well done. So yes, you talked about school. What happened after school? Was it any university nonsense and stuff?
After school, I'll go home, have a bit of dinner.
Yeah.
What
about Wednesday?
Wednesday, yeah, exactly. No sport, obviously. No. I got out of that one. So school, yeah, I did that, and I think it's just in the last couple of years of school, 17, 18, I discovered theatre and acting, and I was just given a couple of chances to do school plays. Fairly late. I didn't do much before that, but particularly we had a drama festival at school. It's like, the pupils could write your own play or sketch shows. And I wrote a play, a comic play, which we then took to Edinburgh Festival a few years later. And it's one of my favourite things I've written. It was a farce, basically. It was a farce that was double booked with a murder mystery on the same show. So I wrote this entire play, which was essentially an Agatha Christie whodunit and a sort of classic door slamming vicar in the closet kind of farce, and they're both double booked and they both have to make their plays work together. And I love doing it. It was a cast of about 10, 12 of us, and that gave me the encouragement to keep doing that at university. I did a theology degree though at university because I thought you can't really get a job just doing comedy and writing and acting, can you? Surely. And I'm still working that one out. So I did theology for 3 years, but really at university I was off at the theatre a lot and doing as many plays, as much comedy acting. I still hadn't discovered stand-up at that point. I left uni, I did drama school for a year, realised I couldn't act. And by that point, I was like 22 and my parents are going, what are you going to be? Come on, vicar, theologian, actor, what is it? And then I saw an advert for a stand-up comedy evening class when I was just leaving drama school. And I thought, I'll try it once. I'll try stand-up once, just to get some more comedy acting roles. I tried it once and I fell for it. I just thought, this is it. Forget acting when you've got to learn lines and audition and that. Stand up, you could pick up the phone and certainly then you could get on a comedy club gig the next week. They just were eager to have you. So that was about 21, 22, the start of that. And those were happy years. The early 20s, I was up in London just on the weekend actually, and I was passing little side streets in kind of Soho and central London, where I used to do gigs. I thought, oh, is that still there? You know, these little rooms that would just fit 15 people, and 2/3 of them were comedians, and they'd have literally 14 acts on, and you could double, treble up in a night. You'd go on early, race across town, do another one. I loved doing that, and there were some very eccentric comedians, you know, like the Jimbo, who's still gigging today, who used to walk on stage as the perpetual open spot. He'd never got a paid gig as far as I know, and you know, he'd walk on stage and leave via the window and go down the drain pipe, and that was the end of his show. But really, the bonkers acts that never touched live at the Apollo, but that they are the lifeblood of the comedy circuit.
Yes,
So they were happy days in the 20s doing that.
You mentioned the vicar word there. Was that ever a serious thought on the horizon?
I think it was a serious thought later. Only a serious question. I think I've never asked that question of myself and had a positive answer, but I've questioned it a few times, and I questioned it again in the pandemic. Actually, you know, the stand-up gigs went, but that made me question again. You know, my mid-40s, going, is it never too late? And I thought, but then whenever I've kind of asked myself this or discussed it with others. I remember years ago, the Bishop of Oxford, I was at an event he was at, and he said, oh, you do comedy shows for churches, don't you? And I went, yes, I do. And he said, yes, you should do less of those, more back on the circuit, bit more in the secular, you know, go and you're meant to be there, I think.
Oh, right, okay.
And I think, I mean that in a loving way, because I think that he had a point that the church gigs are nice. I love doing shows for churches. If I just did those, though, and didn't do anything in the sort of mainstream general market of the comedy industry, then I think it'd be a shame, because I'm one of the trustees of Christians in Media, for example, and we want to be Christians out there in this industry of the media and the comedy industry, and making sure that we are there doing what we do the best we can, or whatever God wants us to do. Never say never.
You do some preaching, though, don't you? You do some occasional stuff, don't you?
Occasional preacher at my church, like an occasional table we wheeled out for special occasions. But I just started doing that last year, so I've preached probably a dozen or so times maybe, and that's been really rewarding, and has drawn on going back to the theology degree again, picking out my notes from the loft and things like that. Although one vicar said to me, like, oh, you're starting the preaching thing. Most preachers starting out, I'd say, make sure you add a few little jokes in there to engage them. With you, fewer jokes. Cut the jokes out. It's not a gig. Okay, must remember that.
Yes, it must be tempting. It's good to include a bit of humour, though, isn't it? I hope it is.
I think. But I am fascinated with how preachers use comedy, and a lot of them. I think the standard is, which certain people do, is they open with a joke and then find the tenuous link to the theme. Sometimes really tenuous. It's why did the chicken cross the road? Well, today's story isn't about chickens, but it is about lambs. The lamb of. And you go, oh, come on, please, But I'm fascinated with those who do it differently. And one I've noticed, and I don't know if I'm just reading this into what he does, he's never told me specifically, but Stephen Gorkroger, Baptist speaker, and I've seen him at various huge events where he won't start with a joke, but he is funny, and he knows he can do funny. And what he'll do is he'll read the room and realise just when he's losing the audience, which kind of, and it's nothing against him, because we all lose the audience at some point. And he'll realise, and he'll stop halfway through a point, and he'll go, I'm losing you. Right. And he launches into a funny thing. We all laugh.
Oh, right.
And then he goes, I've got you again.
Yeah,
right.
Okay.
And he carries on.
Tells a joke, yeah.
So he just reads the room really well. You get natural performers.
Yeah.
And he's one of them. To be honest, I'm not a natural performer. I always think comedians, you're either a writer and a performer, or a performer and a writer. And I think I'm a writer who performs. There are certain people who just have the funny bones, and the rest of us have to sort of do our best to imitate that. I think.
So it's a bit of a struggle stand up, isn't it? As I was saying before, just finished rereading your first book. I think it was your first book, wasn't it? So a Comedian Goes Into
That was the first one.
Which was 10 years ago. So, but again, relating to earlier days, I guess. And it's just endless hours on motorways. And,
it is. Yeah, it's
for not very much money.
Yeah, I forget which the comedian it was who said, basically we are paid as comedians for the driving. We do the gig for nothing. It's just the travel to get there and the all that stuff. It's and in fact there's another comedian I know who is a lorry driver, and if he books a gig in and then goes, right, what haulage can I take to where that's near that, But it is and again I think the other thing, since the pandemic, I have the appetite now to drive to Hull and back, for a gig. And when I started out, I remember distinctly, I think you take every gig you've got going. And one of the early moments I thought, I'm not going to do that anymore, was when I went to Newcastle and back in one night for a 5-minute unpaid open spot when the entire audience just talked all the way through it anyway. And you think that was like a 10-hour round trip. I got home at 4 a.m. for nothing really, for no real gain. But thankfully, that's not so much the case now. And looking at the diary, I'm going further from home than I usually do in the next 6 months or so. Just the way it falls, But it's a lot of life on the road, But it's why podcasts like yours are so marvellous, because they can keep us entertained as we go.
Yes. Well, I'm sure some podcasts can, but
they haven't got your jingles. You've got the jingles.
There we go. So many-stranded individual and prolific output in all sorts of areas, which we'll come on to. So we talked about the television writing, I guess, is the glamour end of the market.
Doesn't feel glamorous when you're writing it, but the end product is always nice to see. Yeah.
How did you get involved in that?
Well, it's a really linear route. All of the writing I've done. When I started out doing stand-up, at the same time I was sending off jokes for radio shows, and BBC are great at always having an open door show. Anyone can write for it. So right now, there's a show called Our DMs Are Open, I think it's called. There's another one called The Skewer. Anyone can write for The Skewer. And one called Breaking the News in BBC Scotland. So when I started, it was the News Headlines with Roy Hudd and June Whitfield and Chris Emmett. And at the time, it was the longest running topical comedy show anywhere in the world. I thought, if I get a job on that, they'll never cancel it. It's a job for life. And I finally got the first joke on what turned out to be the last episode ever. And I killed it off. But the main thing is then that producer. The producer then moved to the news quiz. And then I sort of got a bursary thing to they have a special prize that once a year they give a writer or two this sort of in-house, you've got a job for a year, paid for by the department, you work on all their shows, all their comedy shows. So I did that for a year, and that was great to work on, the Now Show and Dead Ringers and a bit of sitcom and everything, taste of everything. And while I was there, in-house at BBC Radio Entertainment, the lift doors opened, Lee Mack walked out. I was aware of him, but he wasn't really famous. I didn't know him at all. And Lee's always joking. He doesn't have an off switch. So he walked through the lift doors and he said, I have a sketch show. Where are the writers? And I just went, yeah, I'll do it. And my writing partner was in the toilet at the time, so he didn't get the job and I did. So the lesson there is hold it in, because you never know when those literally sliding doors moments may happen.
Absolutely.
So I worked with Lee Mack on his Radio 2 sketch show for a couple of years. Then he moved to TV for Not Going Out, which we're still making 15 years on now. I think we've maybe got one more series in it. You never know, one or two. But and then I recommended Miranda Hart for a part in that. Who I'd seen on the telly. She was great, so she got in that, and then she got her own sitcom, so I worked with her. And from then on, it's just every single job I've ever had in telly is just that producer moved to there and that person moved to there. It's just people. Being talented is at least third on the list. Being available and being nice, I think, are 1 and 2. Yeah, certainly I've found. Anyway. Yeah.
So when you contribute to one of those shows, for example, how you personally, how much do you contribute? Does it vary a lot?
Yeah, totally. It really varies, and that's what I always think at the start of any co-writing job. You've got to establish really early on what they want, really, because Not Going Out for Lee and Miranda, for example, both of them, generally you'd get a script that's half written at least, if not more, by them or someone else, and with lots of highlighted bits. And they really just want you to look at the highlighted bits, add your alternatives, and sometimes that might be, we need a scene that does this information, So with Miranda, for example, I did a lot of the flashbacks. She'd have it's not like that time on that first date when I did this crazy thing. And then I had to write what that would be. Because she could then focus about moving the story on and not get bogged down in what that funny thing might be. So lots of filling in the blanks for those ones.
And it's quite a team, is it? I mean, do they...
It's about 4 or 5 of us.
Do you sit around a table?
Well, both. So Not Going Out, we've done 13... seasons or series. Yes, who knows what they call it nowadays. Yeah. But the first 2 of those we did round a table, and after that we was like, just go home, we'll just do it all remotely from here.
Right. Do you have a particular line that you're most proud of?
Oh, my word.
Radio and television career.
A line. I don't know about. I mean, there must be. There must be. I know with Miranda, I was particularly pleased of. Actually, a couple that leaped to mind. In Miranda, one of her flashback things were the kind of crazy games that she plays with her friend Stevie. And I suggested a game of Where's Miranda, like Where's Wally, but she dresses up as Wally, and you've got to find her. And then I went to the recording of that, and I saw that they'd filmed this giant crowd scene with her dressed up as Wally, and I go, "Oh, there you go, that's my bit. It's nice. They've made an effort." And then similarly with Not Going Out, there's a location scene. I think they were camping, and there was a camping episode, and there was some sort of car. The car was meant to crash into a tree, career off the road and crash into a tree, and then they needed a kind of a funny line, a little punchline at the end of that, and I suggested. I wrote in my little version script, I said, car is turned upside down, and Tim Vine, when he was in it, just says, and handbrake on, because I think he was teaching her to drive. I think that was the idea. So I thought, and handbrake on. So it's quite a nice little bumper. And I thought nothing else of it until then I watched it back again at the recording, and you see this insert of, wow, they turned a car upside down and crashed it into a tree. Based on that thing that I put in, it's quick and easy to write it. Yes. It's when they actually, you think, that's cost them thousands of pounds probably.
What power you wield.
I know, it's worrying, isn't it?
Yeah.
So where do your ideas come from? Just come into your head and you just think, that's good, I'm going to go with that? Or do you tend to think a few options through? And
Well, all of those really, they're all, because I'm co-writing, it's all based on the setups there. You just got to work out the punchline. So with that handbrake on thing, for example, because it was about, it was Tim teaching, I think his ex to drive. So it was driving lessons. So with that, you end up just listing everything you can think of to do a driving lesson. So it's, banging a pen on the dashboard, it's whatever it might be. You just list all that stuff. And 90% of it you'll never use. 99% you'll never use. But you find the one thing that just fits and you go, okay, that's kind of nice. So it's a lot of wastage, really. When you're writing, especially, and go back in the stand-up, you do an Edinburgh Festival show. So I did a show about the Book of Genesis, for example. I did a retelling of the Book of Genesis via stand-up. And part of the reason for that was to get the Bible out there in a secular sort of mainstream way. But also the setup's done for you then. So you're then going, right, Noah and the Ark. What funny things? How do we get this across in an amusing way? You start listing things. You go, okay, it's a zoo, it's floating, and all that sort of stuff. You're just listing constantly. And all comedy is, it's connecting the dots, really, isn't it? I think it's sort of saying, this thing, if there's an equation to comedy, I think it's X nearly equals Y. Like, this thing looks a bit like that thing, So when Michael McIntyre's opening the spice cupboard and personifying all the spices or whatever, you're saying this bizarre situation is a bit like this bizarre situation, So one of my favourite bits, like James Acaster on Mock the Week years ago, had a thing about Brexit, likening Brexit to a herbal tea bag. He said, do you leave it in or out? And he said, us in Europe, we're like that tea bag. You can stay in and be part of a stronger cup of tea, or you can take it out and now you're stronger on your own, but the cup of tea is weaker and the tea bag goes straight in the bin. So it's finding ways of just connecting the dots to tell those stories.
Yeah. And with the stand-up, do you have like a list of kind of themes that you're going to talk through that evening? Is it all quite carefully planned and then?
Yeah, I've got on my phone a notepad of in theory, jokes. I said jokes, but they're just sort of themes. And you look through and you think, oh yeah, well, I'll try and do that, and that. And I always forget, I always do the first couple of bits. You respond to a thing in the room, go down a rabbit hole, forget those 3 new jokes I meant to try. But stand-up, of course, it's all a work in progress. There's never a finished product unless you're doing a big touring show. But for me, that's the thing. Every gig is just about as good as you can tonight, ready for the next one.
So you talked about Christians in media, and you mentioned Tim Vine then. So that just made me think of, because there's quite a cadre, I'm not sure if that's a word that actually exists.
I like it.
Of Christians in the comedy sort of world, isn't there? There's you and Tim, and there's John Archer, I suppose, as well, and Andy Kind we've had on the show, and Milton Jones and Bobby Ball, and is there a gang?
There are sort of we've occasionally tried to formalise, and it's sort of occasionally worked a bit and then not. We need to try again, really, because I think years ago when I sort of started out, I realised that Milton and Tim, Sally Phillips, Joe Enright, they were already going and they were meeting up now and then they stopped meeting around about the time that I started going. I don't know. I don't take it personally. We had a few goes at doing the odd pub meet for comedy writers as well as comedians. And then on Facebook, we've got a little Facebook group mostly for comedians and up and coming comedians who are Christians. So I'd say that, I mean, there are about 20 or 30 that I'm in fairly regular contact with, like, you know, once or twice a year that we'll gig together or we share bookings. You know, I can't do that gig, can you? That sort of thing. But there's another 50, 60, 70 maybe who I'm aware of, who are out there, and we need more, certainly, you know, but it's just nice to know they're out there, you know, because I think, again, with the Christians in Media stuff, it's nice to know that you're not a dot, you know, if there's two of you, that's a line. Three of you is a triangle, the strongest of shapes, you know.
Very good. So we could go on to dodecahedrons. We could do. I'm sure Simon would love to.
I would, actually.
But,
12, that is disciples, isn't it? So
that's
there
we go. It's meant
very
to be.
Christian number.
Yeah, that was inspired.
Of course.
By divine influence once again. And we talked about books a little bit, and mentioned the first book. I must say, sounds a bit creepy crawly, but I loved Hark that we mentioned.
Oh, cheers.
Not
I
Sharp.
enjoyed it.
It's just really very interesting. And sort of a work of history, really, as much as anything. Wasn't
I think it was probably my favourite to do. I think I was the weird guy in Guildford Library in June getting all the Christmas books out, and they look at me like, "What? Why are you doing this?" You know, well, got to write a book. And I loved it. I've always loved Christmas, and I've loved cultural history and like why we do what we do. Still fascinated by it. My sort of new project on that is about the history of broadcasting, the history of the BBC. So I'm kind of, and that was inspired by the Hark book actually, because I was working my way through history in terms of how Christmas has changed over the years, and to look at the first BBC Christmas in 1922. I read that the BBC then had 4 employees and 30,000 listeners. I thought, who are those 4 employees? Did they get along? Spoilers, no, they didn't. And that's sort of what the new book and the new show I'm doing now is all about, really, and who they were. But all of those, you know, everything starts somewhere. And so often, especially with the Christmas history stuff, you realise that so many of these Christmas customs that we take for granted or that are now in churches weren't sort of put in place by the church as such, but by just creative Christian individuals. You know, everyone from Dickens, you know, who was a Christian, wasn't a big fan of church, but he wrote a version of the Gospels for his children. And, you know, it's 1840s. So many of the Christmas things gather apace, you know.
Yeah. There was that one year, wasn't there?
1843, you get a Christmas Carol,
Faithful,
Christmas Carol, Christmas cards, I Come All You Faithful. I think, you know, the first Christmas card and a Christmas Carol both appeared in the same week within half a mile of each other.
It's great.
If I could be there.
I heartily recommend it, listeners. Hark, Paul Kerensa. It's a great book. So you talked about the show. So you're doing the BBC show, and you do a podcast, British Broadcasting Century, which you've done. I only realised this week when I looked at it, it was 72, 73 episodes.
Yeah, so we're up to now. Yeah,
it's a significant undertaking as well.
And even then, we're only up to April 1923. So we're taking it very slow. So literally, the latest episode I've been editing literally today is about one day, one particular. I'm not doing every single day of BBC history, but this particular day was quite noteworthy. It was the first sort of gala comedy concert. And they broadcast from Marconi House, where the BBC was then, into Harrods. Harrods packed their restaurant with 4,000 people to hear this concert being piped in. And just there's little moments like that you know, you suddenly get the first. I love the firsts. So the first religious broadcast, you know, the first. I discovered a few months ago in some research that I don't think has been pieced together until now by myself and this other academic. We did it sort of together. That the first radio dramatist, the first writer for radio, Phyllis Twigg, was also the world's first TV chef 14 years later. And no one's ever linked the two up because she had a pen name and she used one for one for the other. But stories like hers are untold. But there's just these lovely little tales that I'm just enjoying getting out there. So that's why I'm sort of telling it like a book and a show and a podcast. You know,
brilliant. Well, busy times indeed. And I'm pleased to confirm that our dinner party kitchen crew have also been busy. And the waft of braised wildebeest tells me that it's about time we got on with a pre-dinner game of My Favourite Things.
My favourite things.
Yes, this is a very simple game, Paul. We'll give you a series of categories, and all you have to do is tell us your favourite thing in each.
Okay, and our first category is always your favourite book of the Bible.
I should say Genesis, given I've done a show and a book about it, and it's got all the stuff there, isn't it? Really, you've got everything from
It's
the
a good
beginning
one,
to Noah and Abraham and the works there. But I can't. I mean, then you think the Psalms exist, don't they? How can you overlook the Psalms? They're beautiful. And knitted in our, knitted together in the womb by God, and the personal, poetic, and tales of lament, and there's a psalm for every occasion. I'm going to go with Psalms. Please. I love the Psalms.
Fair shout.
Yeah.
I should go for a gospel, really.
Not
I?
really.
But,
Do what you like.
But I'm going to go Psalm. Yeah.
Well, Paul, as
Yes.
we've discovered, you've spent many hours in the world of the BBC, so we'd like to know your favourite towel.
My favourite towel.
Your favourite towel.
What, like a tea? I mean, I can only think of a tea towel. Are there other towels? I suppose, beach towel, aren't there? If you mistake the two and go to the beach with a tea towel, that could be awkward, couldn't it?
Awkward. Yeah.
I'm going to go for the tea towel that's got my kids' faces on it. They've done that drawing thing, at school.
The school thing, yeah.
Where
Brilliant.
you get the whole class, and they are forever. You look back and go, "Oh, did they ever look like that? Really? Did they?" All stick men, but yeah.
Yes.
That tea towel, that one
That's
tea towel.
specific. Good. I was going to
Brilliant.
push you for a specific towel.
That is
rather
the
than
specific tea
a
towel.
category of towels. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're a bit underrated towels.
They are.
Where
Love
would
a
we
towel.
be without towels?
Wet.
Well, yeah.
We'd all be slightly damper.
We'd just be walking around damp all day long.
Right. Okay. Well, our third category, Paul, is
Yes.
always your top 5 films. Now,
Right.
you've seen one or two, I understand, from what you've told us. So,
I have. It doesn't mean I've got a good selection,
No.
does it? It doesn't mean I've got a good selection. And also, I mean, I'm torn because the obvious thing to do is to go with the classics. But at the same time, everyone does that. You've had 44 episodes. You don't need to hear
Yeah.
another person saying The Wizard of Oz again or whatever, or Shawshank again. But I'm going to do one of those, though,
Yeah.
which is Back to the Future, because I have to, because it is the greatest adventure film of all time. I did an Edinburgh Festival show years ago about Back to the Future. And I did a Back to the Future Part 2 show 10 years after that, in which I used footage from my first show, and then I sort of went back in time to the first show and then heckled myself. It was very confusing.
see what you did there. Yeah.
And it probably needed more jokes than just a big gimmick, but I enjoyed it. And so Back to the Future, definitely. Clue. I'm going to go with Clue, the 1985 Cluedo adaptation.
Is that the Tim Curry?
Tim
one?
Curry,
Yeah.
I just adore that film. It's lovely, and they've got the 3 different endings,
Of course, yes.
as well. Because when you're in the cinema, you didn't know which ending you're going to get. So the DVD release has all 3.
Oh, I see. Oh, so it was that they didn't show all 3 at the
No,
cinema.
you never knew which you'd get if you went to
Okay.
the live, the actual cinema booking originally.
Right.
So Clue was fun. Back to the Future, Groundhog Day,
Yes.
and Groundhog Day,
Yes.
and Groundhog Day. No, I need 2 more, don't I? Really?
Well, that's 5, isn't it?
It would be 5, wouldn't it? It would be a bit cheeky to do that. But I'm going to say Big Fish. I love Big Fish. That was a Tim Burton film about
Oh, yeah.
a relationship with a father and a son. It's beautifully sad. Got me there. And if I'm going to pick another classic again, Mary Poppins is the greatest film of all time, I think. Probably.
That's it. Mary Poppins
I think it
is
is
the greatest film of all time.
I think it probably is.
Yeah.
It probably is. Early each day on the steps of. I better not sing it. You'll get a letter.
You weren't in the original, were you?
I wasn't, but I've
It's
shown.
almost uncanny.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I've shown my kids the original, of course, and Mary Poppins Returns, and they prefer the Mary Poppins Returns, which is sacrilege, isn't it? I think that's no good.
So how did you go about choosing those 5 then? You've got such a, as with everything apparently, you've got such an encyclopedic knowledge of them.
Well, the IMDb, the Internet Movie Database.
Yes.
And there's the opportunity to rate your movies on there, and I've rated every film I've ever seen. So what I've done is I've looked at there, and I've just looked at all the ones I've voted 10, and I picked some of those because I've rated I think about 5,000 different films here. Raiders of the Lost Ark, I could have had that. That was another 10. Little Shop of Horrors. Die Hard, obviously. We could go on.
So how many have you got with the rated 10 roughly, do you reckon?
I reckon about
5,000.
Exactly, they're all really good. About 20. I think I've got about
Okay.
20 10 out of 10s. Oh, Charade I was going to go for as well. I might have to bump Mary Poppins for Charade because everyone says Mary Poppins. So even though it's the best film of all time,
Yeah.
I'm not going to sully it by mentioning it on this podcast. So you can no longer have Mary Poppins.
Okay.
I'm going to give you Charade instead, the Cary Grant, Audrey Hepburn spy fest.
I'm not sure I've seen
No,
that.
I haven't seen
Great
that.
film. It's often on telly, and there's a little bit of trivia about Charade, which is that they forgot to copyright it. So anyone can show it. Anyone can make a DVD of it or a video of it or put it on telly because they just forgot to copyright it.
Wow.
Now, our penultimate category is the now familiar Great 8. So 8 quickfire categories designed to unveil our guest's true character.
Yes, so here we go. 8 quickfire categories, starting with your favourite author.
Agatha Christie.
Or favourite type of food?
Kebab. Doner kebab. Large doner. Bit of salad. Mint. Mild chilli. Bit of lemon. In naan bread, not pitta.
Excellent.
In a naan.
In a naan.
Radical choice.
Very good.
I could discuss that for some time, but I feel we're
That's another podcast.
Should we moving on?
Yeah.
Okay, this is possibly quite challenging. Your favourite television programme?
It varies, but right now, The Traitors and its various international versions. I've just been devouring The Traitors Australia, and I just get hooked by it. It's quite a show.
Excellent. Favourite sport?
Snooker? I don't know. Whichever one is least like a sport. Probably snooker.
Snooker.
Snooker, I can put on the snooker and just sit back and just go, I don't really care who wins, but they're nice colours.
It's very calming.
It is.
Very calming. Your favourite band or musical artist?
Roxette.
Okay.
Yep, and it's my wife's as well. That's how we met.
That's nice.
I'm smitten for the Roxette.
Favourite holiday destination?
Oh, I don't know. The next one. The one I got to most look forward to next. I had a good American road trip a few years ago. We did coast to coast to coast. That was nice.
Wow.
And that was, we did a lot of states. I need to go back and finish the rest of the states. So that'll be good.
I'm surprised you haven't written a book or done a podcast about that, having done that.
Good idea.
Yeah.
It starts now.
I'm
Let's do
amazed that you've done that and
Let's
not
do that. That would
turned
be
it
nice.
into something.
That would be a very nice thing to do. We got a plastic bottle, that we were drinking, and we filled it with water from the Atlantic, and then we carried it across, and we released it into the Pacific.
Is that not unbalanced the entire planet?
I'm just starting to worry now that actually maybe we
That was
started.
it.
Is that the butterfly flapping its wings?
Yeah.
It could be that, couldn't it?
It's slightly too much in the Pacific.
What have we done?
Right. Where are we? Yeah. Favourite chocolate bar?
Boost or Fuse, Cadbury's Fuse, that's no longer available. But they should bring that one back.
So difference between a Boost and a Fuse then?
Well, a Boost is biscuit based.
Right.
There is biscuit within Fuse, but Fuse is meant to be a fusion of all of their different leftover things, all covered in a layer of chocolate.
Okay.
And I think it was probably about 1996 to 1999, something like that. Maybe there would be a chocolate connoisseur who can tell us, I'm sure. But a Fuse,
A Fuse, excellent.
And a boost is biscuit based is a lovely sentence, isn't it?
I like that.
Yeah, it's nice.
Okay, favourite board game?
Masquerade, which no one's heard of, have they? It's the most fun I've had playing a board game, I think. It's one of these games you can chuck away the board, really. You don't need the board part. It's basically charades, but instead of acting out a charade, they're really complicated. So it's things like a French salesman who's fixated on lemons. You've got to act that out, and you could be there for hours, but great fun trying to work it out, So yeah, Masquerade.
That sounds great.
Yeah,
fun,
sounds
and
good.
I indeed have never heard of it. Well, very good. That was the Great 8. Our final category on my favourite things is always multiple choice. So I'll give you 3 possible answers. And given your encyclopedic knowledge of historic BBC television broadcasts, we'd like to know your favourite news. So 3 possible answers.
Okay.
The lovely Australian state New South Wales, which actually gives us a delightful callback because unlike Cornwall, New South Wales is pretty much entirely full of sheep.
That is true.
Yeah. So, New South Wales. The ever so slightly left of centre magazine, The News Statesman, or John Craven's Newsround.
Oh, it's got to be. It's always number 3, isn't it? Whenever you ask the multiple choice, it's always number 3, and you can't beat Craven, can you?
No,
you
it was wonderful. I did suspect you might go for that. Although New South Wales is very
It's not bad.
pretty. Yeah. But seriously, I always thought from the work that you've done and from all your experience, just extend the news to newsreader. And actually, more seriously, who's your favourite newsreader? Do you think?
Oh, I've got a newsreader story I could tell you. Maybe. I did about my favourite news. Well, actually, I interviewed Rita Chakrabarti for my podcast recently, and she was lovely. She was a great guest, so I'm going to go with her. But I've done some cover presenting on BBC Radio Surrey and Sussex, and it's like the Sunday breakfast show. They thought, you've got a faith, let's have you on there. Great. And I hadn't realised until literally I turned up first morning at 6 a.m. start. And when I first started doing it, they said, "Oh, you're doing the news. The first thing that happens." I was like, "First thing that happens is I take over after the news." Yeah. They went, "No, you do the news. The news guy comes in at 7. So you've got to literally, you hit that jingle 15 seconds before, it's a 15-second long jingle, and then you read this bit of paper rustling sound effect. I had to read the news. And they thankfully they've changed the rotors. The newsreader comes in now. But about week 3 of doing this, I was still learning the ropes and all that. I had my phone on silent, and the news story mentioned Syria. Very serious thing, of course. And my phone thought I'd said Syria.
Oh, no.
And you could hear on the air, I mentioned this Syrian news story very seriously, and then my phone said, "Need any help?" And I was like, no, this is terrible. No. And then at the end of it, I said, "This is BBC Radio, that's the latest news from BBC Radio Surrey," and it thought I said Syria again, so I had to chuck it across the room. So ever since then, airplane mode, not just on silent. That's what I learned from that. It's bizarre. Double act.
Very good. So Rita Chakrabarti.
But yes, long story short, Rita Chakrabarti.
All right, Soundman Mark, you don't often get a chance to contribute, but obviously you spend a lot of time in and around news studios, haven't you? Have you got a favourite newsreader?
I do like Sean Lay for various reasons. He's a very clever chap, well known as the newsreader who got caught out wearing shorts a little while ago. But he's a very nice fella and very clever, and a good presenter.
And you must have worked alongside all the old greats, all the big names.
Oh yeah.
Robert Dougal.
Not quite.
Don't go quite that far back.
I worked with
Richard Baker.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
But yeah, Peter Snow and Donald McCormack.
Peter Snow is one of those. There are many unusually tall newsreaders. I think Sandy Gore was very tall. I'm going back.
That rhymes. That's lovely.
Yeah.
Sandy Gore was very tall.
Very good. So, favourite news is John Cramer's news round. After all that, well, I'm sure that my favourite things has given us a much clearer insight now into what makes Paul Kerensa tick. Perhaps something we can discuss over the Take a Pew chef's rather fine pickled egg casserole, because
it's the fabulous Take a Pew dinner party, the miraculous Take a Pew dinner party. The food is quite irrelevant and some of the guests are odd. It's the impractical, fantastical Take a Pew dinner party.
Yes, Paul, it's time for the first dinner party of season 4. A new season, but the same rules. Obviously, you can have all of your family and friends at the party, but there remain 4 empty chairs for you to fill.
Yes, and to do that, you have to select one person from any time in history, dead or alive, a cartoon character, and a non-domesticated animal. And then on the final chair, we find a gramophone player, which will play the single piece of music of your choice throughout the dinner.
So, Paul, your first choice. The one person from the whole of history that you would choose to join you for dinner. And remember, it can't be anyone who appears in the Bible or any of your family.
Okay, do I give you the honest answer? I should give you the honest answer.
Yeah, honest answer.
But so without wanting to be the BBC bore once again, the book I'm currently writing is a novel about the early BBC, and it's almost mainly from one person's perspective, and it's the first chief engineer of the BBC, Peter Eckersley. And I find him utterly fascinating. He's my way into this project. And I'll tell you for why. So first of all, in the First World War, he's there. There's so many facets to his life. First of all, he's there at the moment for the first time. They communicate from ground to a plane in motion. That's one thing. He creates air traffic control in this country. That's another thing. Then he's mucking around on the radio, and he's given the task of doing the first regular radio broadcasts in this country, just as so people can check if their radio sets are working, essentially. And rather than just play a gramophone record, it's a bit boring. He breaks all the rules. So he decides, and it's a bit of a tentative moment at this point. The government are like, "Oh, should we allow radio? Should we not?" And he almost wrecks it straight away by having he's like the Goons 4 decades before the Goons. He's playing gramophone records off-centre, drilling new holes in it, seeing what happens, covering them in jams, comparing it with covering it in marmalade, which one plays better. He was told to just do 15 minutes of speech, and he did an hour and a half and made up an opera on the spot. He was just wild. This is a year before the BBC. But it's thanks to him we really have that British kind of sense of humour at the start of British broadcasting. Then was convinced to join the BBC, which he always said he would never do. But he was still wild, and therefore he was having affairs. And John Reith, the head of the BBC, sacked him. And his wife then went off to Germany in the 1930s. They honeymooned at Nuremberg. He had a bit of a dalliance with sort of fascism. He realised the error of his ways just after he built a German broadcast network ahead for Hitler, basically. And then realised the error of his ways. He left his wife there still broadcasting on behalf of Germany. And eventually he was able to become a spy against the Germans. And this is only now coming out now. He worked for MI6 and shared an office with Ian Fleming, who was writing the James Bond novels at the same time. So this guy spans all of that era. And he is someone I would like to share.
Yeah, what an amazing guest.
What a guest.
What was his name again?
Peter Eckersley. I played him on stage last year, actually. And I rather nervously, before I went on stage, I got a letter saying, "Hello, I'm Peter Eckersley's granddaughter. I'm in the front row tonight. I hope it goes all right." I'm like, "Oh, my word, I'm going to play her granddad." You know, so she was very kind, thankfully.
Wow,
Brilliant. Okay.
Okay, so
Anyway,
to compliment.
Yes, this will be a shorter
Peter
answer.
Eckersley, cartoon character.
Scooby-Doo. No further questions.
Straight away. Well, obviously
Scooby-Doo,
I thought
isn't
it
it?
would be, yeah.
Scooby would
Yeah,
be hilarious.
had to be.
Scooby snacks. You know.
Yes, okay. A bit of a pickle.
He'd be a bit wild,
Yeah,
but
he'd
he'd be
be a bit,
funny.
wouldn't
He'd be funny, wouldn't he? Dinner with Scooby.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
No, that's probably a very fair shout. So it's quite a lively occasion.
It is.
Yeah.
But, possibly about to be enlivened yet further by a non-domesticated animal.
Well, I mean, it's got to be otters. Have you had otters?
I think we have had an
I bet
otter.
you've had otters. Have you had koalas? I mean, I want to pick one you've not had before.
We've had a koala, I think.
You've had a koala.
Have we had a koala?
What's an ocelot? I've heard of an ocelot. I don't know what it
an
is.
ocelot, yeah.
I should Google what that is before I invite it to
I
dinner.
don't know, but they do ocelot.
I'd like an ocelot. They do ocelot, don't they?
Yeah.
I think it sounds good, doesn't it?
It does sound good.
But you'd really like an otter.
I'd like an otter.
Yeah.
I'm going to Google.
Can we just quickly Google ocelot?
I mean, it's
just
nice
check?
to know, isn't it? You know, you want to know who you
Sorry, I've got plenty
invite.
of time.
Basically, whenever you invite anyone to dinner, you always do a
Yeah.
Google image search beforehand, don't you?
I think I know what one is, but
Oh,
I don't
actually,
want
it's
to
not
embarrass
that.
myself.
It's not as exciting as I thought. It's just a wild cat. I'm going with
Oh
otter.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm just going to go with otter.
That's right. It's an ocelot. Yeah, I
Yeah.
can picture it now.
Ray Liotta.
Yeah, I think otter's good. Is that?
Yeah, Scooby would get on, I guess, with an otter, I suppose.
I was an otter keeper briefly.
Oh, were you?
At a zoo. Yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah.
Did you write a podcast about it?
No, I didn't. It was a birthday present. It was one of these like otter experiences. You get to clean the otters out for a day. So my wife got it for me. It was
Fantastic.
It was a wonderful day out.
Marvellous. Right. It's a great fun party already, and then but it's accompanied all accompanied even by the strains of one piece of music to play repeatedly throughout the entire dinner.
Can I have your jingles?
Yes,
I think
you
that
can.
might be nice. That might be
Yeah.
might
You'd have to-
enliven the occasion.
Okay, even those would get slightly
They probably would do, wouldn't they?
They do get nauseating after a
slightly
while. don't they?
tiresome. Yes.
Even, I mean, the music I actually play at home a lot is Brian Eno. You know, that kind of esoteric sort of. But I'm the only one really who I work well to it. You know, but my family walk in and go, "He's not playing that again, is he?" So it would drive my dinner guests mad. So I think I'd probably have to go for something better for background. Actually, Dave Brubeck is great for dinner. Dave Brubeck and
Yeah, it's very harmless.
Take 5, all that sort of stuff.
All the jazz fans would be saying, "How dare you call it harmless? Cutting edge."
Indeed.
Yes, well, any of those would be wonderful. Well, I hope you get to enjoy such assembled company very soon, Paul. Now, just before we get all theological, it's time to complete our journey into Kerensa world as we ask you...
12 years from now, what would you like to be doing? Or would it mainly be the same? Or would you rather be canoeing, for example?
Yeah, it's just an example.
Yes, Paul, what would you like us to be talking about if we were having this conversation with you 12 years from now?
I'd like to think we'd just be celebrating the 12-year anniversary of this conversation. I think, I mean, if I'm honest, I'm in a time of change, I think, at the minute. I do have 8 jobs, and we've talked about most of them. I'm a university lecturer as well. One day a week I do that, which is just something I started in the pandemic. So I'm doing too much, really. And I think the dream is writing novels by the sea. Writing crime novels. I want to be Angela Lansbury, basically,
Excellent.
in Murder, She Wrote, except by the sea, you know, doing that. So that would be nice. But to start doing that, I'd need to start writing crime novels. And I've not written one yet. So I've started writing one. So it'd be quite nice to do that someday. That's the dream. I kind of see in a way for another 10 years the stand-up and the like. And I'll keep doing, I will always feel the lure to do performances and things. But at some point, I just feel that call to the ocean.
You don't think that you might have gone the vicar route?
I'll keep asking the question.
Yeah.
I will keep
Never
asking.
know.
I promise I'll keep asking.
Yeah.
And if I hear in the affirmative,
No pressure.
You never know, but we'll see.
Well, we wish you every blessing, Paul.
Well, thank you.
Wherever
I will.
life and the Lord may take you.
I will take those blessings.
Now, very shortly, we would be delighted if you could bring some class to the show with your spiritual pearl of wisdom. Just before that, I'm pleased to report that over our little summer break, we've come across plenty more myths and conspiracy theories about the Bible and indeed the Christian faith. So please welcome to the stage the little part of the show that we like to call...
Is it true? Is it true? Is it true? Is it true?
Yes, is it true? And this time, Paul, we are thinking about those somewhat mysterious biblical creatures, angels. With the English word coming from the Greek meaning messenger, there are many mentions of angels throughout the Bible, from two of them visiting Lot in Sodom in the book of Genesis, one of your favourites, to the host of angels in Revelation. Of course, the angel Gabriel famously announces the birth of Jesus, and there is an unnamed angel present when Jesus' tomb is discovered. Now, there is a popular belief today that everyone has a guardian angel, although we're not sure if that's necessarily biblical. And our question for you is this: Paul Kerensa, is it true that angels are especially partial to angel delight?
Well, I'm pleased you asked this question. I am pleased you asked this. In fact, weirdly, I mentioned 3 minutes ago that I'd half written a crime novel. This is true. It's actually about angels. It's a whodunit in heaven.
Wow.
And I did it I've only written half the book, but I did a lot of research into angels and the different levels. You get the angels and the archangels and I'm delighted you mentioned the angel delight, because that did come up in my research as something that is definitely 100% untrue. Untrue. That's not there. No. They like bird's custard.
I always preferred instant whip to angel. I was never an angel delight person. But that was, so we don't think. So angels, do you think angels eat?
I don't know. That's a good question. I don't think they do.
The odd kebab, maybe.
The odd kebab, but they've got the wings on some of them have got the wings on the face, haven't they? Which might
be messy.
Give them.
Okay, so we don't think that's true.
I think it's. To quote "Would I lie to you?" I think it's a lie.
Yes.
It's a lie.
Well, in any case, thank you for bringing your wisdom to that potentially controversial aspect of faith. And with that, Paul, perhaps you would bless us with your spiritual pearl of wisdom.
It's a spiritual pearl of wisdom.
Beautiful jingle, as ever. I can't promise to be particularly wise or anything, but I was just thinking what's on my heart generally lately. And I think one of the things I keep thinking about and coming back to is that we aren't, as people, we're not as good as we think we are on our best days, but we're not as bad as we think we are on our worst days. And I think more than ever, I'm seeing so much toxicity on social media, and maybe it's, I'm looking at my kids who are not quite teenagers yet, but we can see that coming over the horizon. And we're very conscious of how easy it is to believe what you are told about yourself, I think. And I still hear that myself as a comedian. You see stuff online. I've had horrible stuff said about me on social media, even in the last few days, because I dared mention one particular thing which someone disagreed with. And, I don't want to go down the heavy route of culture wars and the like, but culture peace is surely what I would crave more than anything. So I think if we're not as bad as we sometimes think we may be, and we're sometimes not as good as we think we are, this is a development of Sarah Millican, the comedian, has a thing called Millican's Law, which is if you have a brilliant gig, you can think you're the best comedian on the planet, but you're only allowed to think that until 10 o'clock the next morning. Because equally, the flip side is if you have a terrible gig and you feel like giving up and you feel like you're the worst comedian on the planet, you're allowed to inhabit that feeling, but only again till 10 o'clock the next morning. And then you wipe the slate clean and you start again. And those are her words. You wipe the slate clean. And you don't have to dig too far to find the theological motif within that of Jesus wiping the slate clean. I'm sure that's not what Sarah Millican has in mind, but it's what I have in mind as I consider that. And I think this relates to another thing I've been thinking of lately, which also ties in with my dinner party guest of Peter Eckersley, who had that very unfortunate brush with fascism and with not quite as far as Nazism, but he certainly dabbled in those areas in the 1930s, as many did, as they were trying to work out what world we were living in. And in time, people realised the error of those ways. And it's a story of redemption for him, I think, because this guy, Peter Eckersley, came back and realised where he went wrong. Many wouldn't accept him, and he ended up spying, as I said, for Britain. And he had that redemptive story. And I think sometimes we hear those words of accusation to each other. And I think in my ideal world, in my ideal world, you wouldn't have any of the negative. And in God's ideal world, we don't have this either. But I hear words like, racist, sexist, misogynist used as nouns. And I think they're adjectives more than nouns. I think it's very easy to point to someone and say, you are this. You are a racist, a sexist, a fascist. And maybe people have said things and done things. I've done things in the past that I know. I've done actions or had thoughts which are any of those things, I'm sure. And I've made mistakes. But they are mistakes, and I acknowledge those mistakes. And I think if we saw those things as adjectives more than nouns, it shows that there is redemption and hope for all of us, that we're all just idiots walking around on this planet. And, you look in the Bible and you see the 12 disciples who we see in churches and stained glass windows, and they as well, they get things wrong all the time. They are there in the Gospels to be this sort of Greek chorus of people who question Jesus and say, did you mean that? And Jesus says, no, you weren't paying attention, were you? No, I didn't. And as a result, in the 12 disciples, you get betrayers, deniers, doubters, people finding their way and trying to improve next time. And that's all that we are doing as well. So I think those negative things that we can be told about ourselves, or that we may think ourselves as well, that's just today. And then there's always tomorrow. It's not about, am I the best at this? Am I the worst at that? It's that I can always do better. And that God is the unchanging. We change all the time, but God is the one who is unchanging. And he has a better plan for us. So I think we keep our eyes fixed on God, making sure that our focus is on that right path. Because like that sort of tanker at sea, if you go 1 degree off in a few hundred miles, you're going to hit the wrong island. So may we keep our eyes fixed on where we need to be going. And that is the way, the truth, and the life.
It's a spiritual pearl of wisdom.
Well, thank you very much for that, Paul. Now, many have said that here on the Take a Pew podcast, we leave the worst till last. And I agree. Because before we let you go, we must, I'm afraid, dispense with this.
Simon's Random Question.
Simon, you've had all summer to come up with something meaningful, so it is with more optimism than usual that I ask you, what is your random question for Paul?
Well, Ian, I think you'll be impressed, because this kind of dovetails nicely with our Is It True question about angels and angel delight. Because, Paul, my random question for you is this. What would be the most likely scenario wherein an animal would eat a foodstuff that had the name of that animal in it? Just to be clear, I'm obviously not talking about cannibalism here. What I mean, for example, is a horse eating some horseradish. Perfectly possible. Probably make it sneeze, but is that the most credible example?
Well, I think the most credible example would be a dog and dog food.
Yes.
Probably. Or a cat and cat food, maybe. Or a horse and horse. I could go on,
Yes,
but I won't.
yes. I think to be fair, discounting those.
Discounting those.
Those obvious.
Oh, well.
He's no good.
If you're gonna,
No, but it's a fair shout.
Yeah.
It is a fair shout. I mean, prawns eating prawn cocktail crisps. Again, that is that cannibalism? I don't think
Well,
prawn.
that's close. Yeah.
But I don't think a prawn cocktail crisp has ever really been near a prawn.
Probably hasn't actually,
it?
has it,
I
to
think
be
that's
honest?
probably.
No.
So in fact, that's probably quite likely because you get those unfortunate litterings in the sea, or people drop a crisp. I mean, who doesn't eat a crisp on the beach?
Exactly.
And a prawn just comes along, has a little bit of that. It's quite possible, isn't it?
I quite like that one.
Yeah, because or a pig and pork scratchings. Because again, I don't know, have pork scratchings been near a pig? That's more likely, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a bit close.
That's more likely. So I think
I just think, I don't know if there's like a jellyfish eating some jelly.
Some jelly?
Would be
that's quite possible.
That-
Yeah.
It's unlikely though, isn't it? Still,
Can they eat jelly? Simon, you're the marine biologist. Jelly?
Probably with difficulty.
Yeah.
They might have to absorb it somehow.
Right.
But which are you more likely to find in the sea? A crisp or you don't bring a jelly to the beach, do you?
No,
not typically.
That's true.
Hurl it in the sea. Although that would be quite an image.
To be fair, it's not an entirely realistic scenario.
No.
But
It's not. And do you know what I hate about this question is that as I'm driving home, I'll think of the perfect answer.
What about a bat, Ian? A bat could
a
what?
bat could eat some Battenberg.
Oh, Battenberg.
That's
A bit of
possible.
Battenberg. It's
Yeah.
possible.
If you put a little bit of Battenberg on the lawn,
Yeah.
we get bats here. I might tonight. I put a little
Put
bit of
some- put it
Battenberg
out.
from
Yeah.
go to the co-op. Other supermarkets are available on the lawn. And wait till the bats come out because then I could actually possibly end up with a picture of a bat eating some
fantastic.
Battenberg.
Bat eating Battenberg.
Yeah, that would be
a first.
That would be.
Yeah.
Right. You could
Yeah.
get moose eating some moose, couldn't you?
Yeah.
That's possible.
Buffalo and buffalo wings.
A penguin eating a penguin, I suppose.
Oh, that would be awesome.
That'd be wonderful.
You could definitely have that.
Yeah. Or
Very-
a cobra could go out for a curry and have a pint of cobra.
If a cobra and a kingfisher
Ooh.
went out for a curry, what beer do they order?
There's a joke there somewhere.
It's awkward,
isn't
isn't
there?
it? Could be very
Make a
awkward.
note.
A Bangler, I would have thought.
You can have that one.
Right. Yeah.
Not that you want it. well, Simon, thanks for that. I will never again personally look at a piece of Battenberg without wondering whether it's been nibbled by a bat. But in any case, that was
Simon's random question.
And so, Paul, it's time for the credits on this particular outing of the Take a Pew podcast. Thank you ever so much for coming along to Take a Pew Towers, and thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
And dear listeners, thank you for being with us. If you've enjoyed listening, why not subscribe to the show wherever you listen so that you don't miss out on upcoming Take a Pew fun. You can also find us all over social media, and we have a fax machine in the corner. We're delighted to be up and running with Season 4, so Simon and I will be back very soon to bring you plenty more fun, faith and flights of fancy. But in the meantime, it's Toodlepip from me.
And tatty bye from me.
Join us again next time as we take a pew.
Take a pew.